Thank y'all. Y'all really put me at ease after following Sydney's great message and cookies. So show of hands real quick, how many in this room have a strategic plan on how they grow their business? I figure pretty much most everybody. How many have a model through which they build culture as their business scales? A few less hands, right? So over the next 15 minutes, I hope to show everybody here how we feel like a model to grow your culture is just as important as a strategic plan to grow your business. Thanks for being here today. I already took away a couple of really cool action items from Sydney's talk on how to engage, how to be present, how to do a number of different things. I hope you all can take a few concrete ideas from the stories that I'll share today back to your companies and really focus on building the culture that you want. My name's Jim Rhodes. I've been at Wayne Brothers, we're out of Davidson, North Carolina, for the last 20 years. And I've watched us go from a small mom and pop company to one that does $250 million in revenue, operates across the entire Southeast, and has 3 different business lines: construction, material sales, equipment rental, and a specialty design build engineering firm. Over the 40 years that Wayne Brothers has been in business, we've found that the success in building our culture is directly correlated to the success in the field and on the financial statements. So we didn't just define what our culture was, that's where we started, but we also had to put together a model on how we might build that culture throughout the organization. So here's that model. I know this is a lot to look at, but let's start where pretty much everything always should. It starts with me, right? It starts with the individual. If you take your eyes down to the bottom right-hand side and you see that it starts with having the right mindset. If I have the right mindset, then I can build culture. Culture goes through that wheel and creates the right mindset. That's what I can do as the individual. The company in return can then invest in me. If the company invests in me, we're going to create the right culture. If I individually and the company as a whole do the right things, then the results are at the top. We're going to improve morale. We're going to attract and retain an inspired and engaged workforce. All of that is going to build more culture. I know this is a lot to look at on this slide, so I'm going to share a few stories with you that hopefully illustrate each one of these individually. Here was a fun project. Ended up being a wonderfully successful project. But at the very beginning, that success was looking really, really iffy. Just like every project, we had a pre-planning meeting, we went through our entire process, we got to the site, we had a wonderful plan, and like one of my favorite people always says, everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the face. And we got on site, we got punched in the face twice very quickly. I won't bore you with the details of it, but the rock that was on site had been mapped with this new technology, and when we got there, we figured out that it was about 5 feet higher than what we originally thought. And some of it literally directly beneath the topsoil. That was the first punch. The second punch, it starts raining, and it rains about every other day. And all of a sudden, we've got a 200-acre site that's almost flat with rock right below the surface, and it's raining every day. The site literally turned to muck. Our morale turned to muck as well, if I'm being quite honest. Production, efficiency, safety, quality, all of that followed. This was a massively important job for us. We had a contract that was almost $100 million to do the site and the concrete on this job. If this went in the wrong direction, it would have drastic implications to the company as a whole. Everything seemed to be going wrong. We were trying everything to get the ship pointed back in the right direction. We sent people to the job. They got frustrated and either quit or became disengaged. We changed leadership around. They were frustrated, not communicating. We sent more equipment. It wasn't being utilized. And when it was, we were having a few equipment incidents that none of us want. Worst of all of us quote unquote smart people from the office showed up with our little snapshot, shoot from the hip ideas, which always work, right? Yeah, we were the same boat. Nothing was working. And one day, our operations manager showed up and said, guys, we need to change our mindset. We need to quit focusing on the negative, and we need to start focusing on the positive. So in the morning meetings, we quit telling everybody what they were doing wrong, and we started recognizing them for what they were doing right. We quit telling people how to work, and we started talking about, here's the outcome that we want. And the crew started putting together plans on how they could get there. We quit barking orders and started asking for feedback. We quit just lamenting the lack of production and started asking our team to be engaged and tell us what they would like to get done in a day. And then they turned it into games to compete between the crews to see if they could get there. So all of that went from heading in the complete wrong direction, in the mud. It turned around on a dime, morale improved, planning, communication, and execution all improved. Production went through the roof, and it ended up becoming one of the most successful projects that we've had in the entire year. We took all those lessons learned, turned them into best practices, and implemented them across the group and then across the company. And so I'm sure when you hear us talk about lack of production, poor communication, poor engagement, attrition with the workforce, we don't have a monopoly on these issues at Wayne Brothers. These are things that are going on in the entire construction industry. These stats that you see here, I'm sure you'll see 100 more times over the course of this week. You've probably seen them before here. But we would submit that these stats represent some of the biggest issues that we're facing in the construction industry right now. NCCER has some stats on their website that show up to half of the workforce is going to retire in the next 5 or 6 years. I would submit that 65 to 75% of that workforce has the knowledge base, right? So we're going to take a big hit here soon. Of the people that are in the industry, Gallup tells us that roughly 30% are engaged. What does engaged mean? They're enthusiastic. They come to the job. They're excited about what's going on. They know where they're going, and they're trying to get there. So we have 70% of the people who are not that. And then there was a study out of Europe on lean construction that says 50% or more of the cost put in place in a construction project is waste. So I want to talk about all these, but let's start with waste. Who here, if I said, think about a project you have going on right now today, and you would say that 50% or more of the cost, the job cost on that job, is non-value add waste. It was literally waste just on the project. Show of hands, who thinks that? Not many, right? This time, a couple years ago, I wouldn't have had my hand up either. But I want to share a story with you all now on why my hand does go up. Pretty cool project here. It's called Swiftwater. Not a big project, but an important one. When we're done with it, which we're getting close, it'll be a place where first responders can go and learn how to rescue people in fast-moving floodwaters or rising rivers. So here I am, middle of North Carolina, as Wally said earlier, and I'm going, we don't have a whole lot of flooding. Nobody I know has ever been rescued from swift water. But if I can stop talking about culture for a minute and tell you all something personal, I grew up in Asheville, North Carolina. And I don't know if y'all are familiar, but it's in the hills of western North Carolina, and it was the epicenter of where Hurricane Helene hit a month or so ago. And northern Georgia, western North Carolina, eastern Tennessee just got brutalized by this storm. There are a bunch of people in the hills that are just like us that have lost a lot, and some that have literally lost everything. The stories that you hear and see are heartbreaking. If you hadn't, it's kind of gone out of the news cycle now. If you hadn't been in western North Carolina, it's hard to understand what all's going. But I would ask, if you feel called, please remember the people in the hills of western North Carolina, because their needs won't be over for 5, maybe even 10 years. If you feel led to give time, talent, treasure, prayers, all of it is needed in western North Carolina. If you're not sure how to do that, please at some point find me during the summit. I'd love to share some ideas and opportunities with you on how we can help our brethren up in the mountains of eastern Tennessee, northern Georgia, and western Carolina. So I appreciate you all letting me get that personal plug in. Let's get back to Swiftwater. Like I said, it's not a big project. Didn't have a whole lot of dirt to move, but we had a 30-ton excavator loading a series of 30-ton trucks, hauling to a D6 dozer, sheep's foot roller, putting fill in place. And we were looking at our telematics dashboard, and we realized we've got some idle time on the trucks. So what do? You call the superintendent. Hey, we got idle time on the trucks. How's everything looking? Oh, no, boss. Everything's rolling out here, running like a top. No idle time. The trucks are rolling. That's the story we always get, right? Well, if you remember the steel mill plant that we just talked about, that senior superintendent's name is Bruce. We promoted him after that project to general superintendent. But we didn't ask him to take on another set of projects. We didn't ask him to take on mentoring senior superintendents. We didn't ask him to do anything revenue generating. We said, Bruce, we want you to be in charge of training our workforce, but not just training them in a setting like this. Go to where they are. Go to the field. We want you to improve their skills in the field, and we want you to focus on production flow on our project. So Bruce goes out to the job, he watches a couple cycles, and pretty quickly he figures out what's going on. It's taken 4 minutes to load a 30-ton truck, which is more than double what it should. So Bruce waits till lunchtime, spends about 45 minutes with that operator, shows him some techniques on how he can improve his production time. Hey, let's get the excavator level to start with, right? He shows him things like that. And in that 45-minute period, this operator went from taking over 4 minutes to load a truck to less than a minute and a half. So that's a 60% improvement, over 60% improvement. Or you could also say a reduction in 60% or more of waste, right? So here's the coolest thing about that. What started as our operations manager looking at a dashboard and seeing some numbers that didn't align with what he wanted turned into a couple of phone calls that led to an opportunity for us to invest in our team and create some engagement. But it wasn't just that one operator who became engaged. Yes, he was loading the trucks, he was the one that got better, but all of a sudden the entire team was excited. The entire team was, how many loads per hour do we need to get? How much can we get before lunch? How many trucks did we get yesterday? And the next thing you know, they're asking us if they can eat in the equipment because they want to beat the record that they set yesterday. So that investment in one person didn't create engagement in one person, it created engagement in the entire team. So if we invest in people, that drives engagement, it reduces waste, it increases profits, that provides more money for us to invest in people. You can see how that cycle works through and it just keeps going, you keep getting better. So it's pretty clear, we feel like, how investing in people drives engagement, how reducing waste increases profits. But what becomes less clear is how does driving engagement really reduce waste? So let's go back to this Gallup study that we talked about earlier. Here are the results from that study. When you're comparing a workforce that is engaged in the top quartile versus the bottom quartile of employee engagement, these are some of the stats you see, not all but some. You reduce turnover by over 40%. You improve quality issues by more than 40%. You have over a 60% decrease in safety incidents. That's massive. That's not a stat on a page, that's real life. Your profitability goes up more than 20%, right? So when we go back to those stats that we talked about were some of the biggest issues in our industry, engagement solves those. If we have a workforce that is 30% engaged and we can increase that, if we can flip those numbers and get them to 70% or more, then we are not only going to retain people, but we are going to attract new people that are going to help us replace those that are eventually going to reach retirement age. All of that decrease waste, which improves profitability and allows us more dollars to invest not just in our company, but in our people. That's what we feel like builds culture. So sometimes you find one or two people where no matter how much you invest in them, They just don't seem to get there. So let me share another story with you. Y'all remember these little boogers? About 5 years ago, if we would have put that little molecule or whatever it is on the screen, nobody would have known what it is, and we all would have been the better for it, right? But in 2020, early 2020, COVID had kind of shut the world down. We were at the point of our backlog. We were transitioning from a number of big projects we're finishing up. We were adding new projects that were about to get started. And when the whole world shut down, nobody really knew what was going on. Some of these projects were pushing out. Some of them were canceling. We needed some work. Well, Project SAFE was a project that came together very quickly, about 4 or 5 months after COVID hit the U.S., and it was in the supply chain for Project Warp Speed, which was the initiative that the government put together to develop, manufacture, and distribute the vaccine. Now, I don't mention all this to endorse or condemn the vaccine. What I do is to tell you how quickly this all came together. We got on site, and we had a design that was written on the back of a napkin, and I swear that design wasn't complete until we finished the punch list. It was brutal. We were out there, we had more questions than answers. Our team was struggling. Again, how come anytime you have a project that's going wrong, it starts to rain? Every single time. We're in the muck and the mud again. We have a lot of really good people out there doing a lot of really good work, but we had a few people that weren't living up to our expectations. And we had one person in particular who was actively disengaged in bringing the rest of the team down. I can remember talking with Rick, our operations manager, and going, we're already shorthanded. We can't lose another person. That crew will not be able to function. Well, this person just made it absolutely impossible for us to continue. Eventually, we had to let them go. So what happened the next day? The crew shows up when in our mind and going, oh, great. We got all this work to do. We were already shorthanded. Now we got one less. What was the result? Opposite. They were happy. They started having fun. Morale improved. It was awesome. And then by the end of it, when we really had the hard push to get the job done, we actually had volunteers that were willing to go down there and work on that crew, right? So what are the lessons learned here? Culture will become your lowest acceptable behavior. If you allow somebody who does not align with your values, who is not actively improving your culture, then you are allowing your culture to become whatever it is that person decides they want to do on that day. You are giving over the reins of your culture to that person who is actively disengaged and tearing your company down. Second, safety, most importantly, safety, production, retention, and engagement all follow morale. So let's talk a little bit more about a few other things that we've done to build culture. We don't have time to get into stories on all these. Over here on the left side is what we did years ago, and we defined what our culture is. We have our values in those blocks on the left. We created a series of behaviors that demonstrate how we're going to live out each one of these values. So it's tangible. We can talk about it. You remember that general superintendent, Bruce? He doesn't generate any revenue. All he does is go around and train people and improve workflow. We took a project manager out of the field and asked them to come in and be a human resource specialist that literally just spent all of their time in the field connecting with the craft and tying them back to our office so that we could figure out better how to serve their needs. We hired a development specialist, a leadership development specialist. We asked him to go work in the field for almost a year so that when he came in to start building our leadership curriculum, he could do it in a way that had the craft in mind. Once he got in the office, we spent more than 6 figures on developing that leadership curriculum. And then we put little short videos together, plug here, and uploaded them to the Build to Wit training app so that we kind of democratize the information. It's not just somebody who gets met on a job site or comes into class, they can go pull it for themselves. We completely revamped our organizational structure to decrease the number of direct reports and improve communication. So why do I list all those things? I'm not bragging here. These are all things that do not generate revenue. They are a cost. So what were the results that we saw over the period of implementing these things? Our revenue doubled. And our net profits, I'm talking about net here, more than quadrupled. So keep that in mind. When we build culture, what do we say at the beginning? We feel like when we are the most successful in the field, on the income statement, in the balance sheet, it's because our culture is where we want it to be. So let me share a quick story with you. This is my dog, Mac. This was Mac when he's a lot younger. He's about 14 years old. He's a little grayer. His hips aren't working as well. He tries to keep up with our other 4-year-old dog, Gus. But we got Mac, my wife and I, right after we got married, moved in together, and my parents were in town one weekend. And my dad and I go outside and we're throwing the ball for Mac. I throw the ball, Mac goes, picks it up, drops about 5 feet in front of me, and then runs off in whichever direction that he wants me to throw the ball. So I pick it up, I throw it. We do that about 2 or 3 times, and my dad looks at me and says, "Son, either you're training him or he's training you." And that always stuck with me. And I'll draw an analogy to culture. If you let your culture just be this puppy dog that runs wild, every single day it will run off in whichever direction that it wants to. And you'll be chasing it. It will be training you. So how do we go about training our culture? In our mind, you have to do 2 things. 1, you have to define it. And then 2, you have to build it. So what you'll see over here on the left is how we've defined our culture. This is what Wayne Brothers is. Our purpose is building together in pursuit of excellence. Our goal is to be the #1 construction services team, and we do that through living out these values. We live out these values by exhibiting these behaviors. That is what our culture is. But that's not enough. We also have to build culture every single day. We have to have a plan on how we build what we developed, what we defined. It starts with me. I have to have the right mindset. If I have the right mindset, then I have the ability to make the right decisions that produce the right behaviors that align with our core values. If I'm living out our core values, then I am living out our purpose, building together in pursuit of excellence. And that builds culture. If we build that culture, it encourages me to continue to have the right mindset. The company can then have dollars to invest in me. That reduces waste. That increases profits. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Those profits are available to the company to continue to invest in the company and the people in it. And if I and the company both do our job and we're successful, then we've improved morale across the entire organization. And we are not only retaining the wonderful workforce that we have, but we are attracting those that aren't currently in this workforce. And I feel like that's what this entire summit is about. How are we going to get the people who aren't here? I'm preaching to the choir. Every single one of you all, I would imagine, has an engaged workforce. How do we get the ones that don't know how wonderful of an industry this is yet? We all need a strategic plan. But we would submit that you also need a plan on how to build culture. Peter Drucker is one of the best business minds that's ever lived, and he said, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast." So thank you all for your time.
Any questions for Jim? Besides, you have cookies?
My bad.
In back, Jim. Go ahead.
Yeah, a 2-part answer. The vast majority of what we talked about has been the last few years. You know, we got literally punched in the face during COVID. We had grown to a point where all of the things that we had, all the things that we needed, we didn't have. And we were struggling, we were heading in the wrong direction. After, and I'm talking about my group specifically, after years and years, over a decade of continual growth and profitable growth, we had our first year where we declined in both profit and revenue. And so it was 2020 when we realized, and it wasn't because of COVID, it was because we had gotten out over our skis and grown too much, where we started implementing that. So that's answer 1. The second is, we started to define what this culture was back in 2015. And it's literally been, it took 5 years for us to really get traction with it. So what I would submit to everybody here is, if you've just defined your culture, if you're trying to define what your values and behaviors are, Give it time. It takes time to get traction. You have, every single day you're training that puppy, right? It takes time. But once you do it, it is so worth it.
Great question. You have a question, Rob? Make it quick. The question is, what becomes the maintenance plan on this?
Yeah, very good question. Hopefully, one thing that I really want to make clear is this isn't a one-time through on this. This model that's over here that you're looking at, this isn't one time through. You're getting better every single day. So as you build culture through having the right mindset, you have the right behaviors, you're decreasing, you're living out your values, you're driving towards your purpose, that builds more culture, and you're literally iterating through this model every single time. So I would submit that what Sydney gave us earlier are awesome concrete examples on how to continue to iterate through this model. This model would apply to what Sydney was saying. We got to talk to our teams. Start, stop, continue was a wonderful one. If we're going to ask questions of our team members, we have to be ready to do something with the results that they give us. So there's millions of different ways that I feel like you can adopt this model and things that you can do inside of it. But I think your question is well taken. It is not a do this 1 year and then you're good. It is every single year you're training that puppy dog.
And I would submit that when you fired that operator, that's one of the biggest maintenance plans you can have. I love what you did. You told war stories, you had data, you gave us a model, and when we talked in prep, we talked about, look, this doesn't have to be your model, but you need a model. You need a framework. Thanks again, Jim. Appreciate it.